Welcome back to the Matside, the home of YouTube wrestling for IntermatWrestle.com. I'm your host, Richard Anderson Mann, and joining me as always, Clay Sauertieg. Clay, how are you?
Glad to be back. It's been what, three or 4 weeks, I think, since our last show.
Yeah, you were sick. I was kind of sick. The world's crumbling around us. It's good to be back.
Good timing. Hopefully, we'll have some fun stuff for review here. Looking like we're going to look back at last night's Flow card. Maybe talk a little bit more about the upcoming impromptu Flow card that we're going to have Wednesday, and maybe have something looking back at that. So, could be a busy week of wrestling now that college wrestling's going, Flow's going, lots going on.
Absolutely. More wrestling all over the place as we like it. Just a reminder, like the video if you like it, subscribe if you want to subscribe. We're doing great things, always moving forward. But like Clay said, we're going to break down the Flow card. It is Sunday morning, so it was last night. The original main event of Jordan Burroughs and David Taylor has been delayed a few days due to some unlikely contacts. But we will start this one at the first match of the night, 155 pounds. Mitch McKee, formerly of the University of Minnesota, taking on Tristan Moran, formerly of Oklahoma State and Wisconsin. The final was 11-1, and I think Moran posted on Twitter after the match saying he needs to get better at freestyle. I thought that while McKee clearly, has always been better at freestyle than folk style, and he did get his trademark head pinch in this match, I was impressed because McKee was able to get to legs and finish clean, which sometimes can be his problem. And I thought it kind of transcended his freestyle quirks, and he basically dominated. He scored. He got an early exposure. He got a takedown, 2 gut wrenches, and his head pinch to close it out. Final was 11-1.
Yeah, I'd have to look back at their college matchups, but when I think of the two, I think of them as fairly evenly matched. But obviously, McKee is the much more savvy freestyle wrestler. Moran's style, in addition to needing to improve things like parterre offense and defense and square off exposures, Moran's style is not particularly conducive to freestyle, and that a lot of his defense in college would have been considered exposures in freestyle. So I think that might have played a little bit into why McKee was able to finish a little more easily than you would normally expect somebody to finish on Tristan Moran. But this is a fairly typical Mitch McKee performance. Was good on top, scored from that head pinch, crafty. I think he's going to be a guy that fairly quickly establishes himself as a tough out on the senior ladder, just in terms of the number of things he can do, both offensively and defensively. Moran in a good spot there with the Wisconsin RTC. Good to be in a room with somebody like Seth Gross. Some really interesting looks between the two of them in terms of what they give you defensively, in terms of exposure, and really the same body types too with their length. So I think Moran, you could see a pretty big learning curve in the next couple of years if he sticks with it. But right now, I think this was a relatively unsurprising result in my book.
Yeah, and I think Gross is a guy who has adapted the sort of folk style funkiness to freestyle very well, which we'll get to later in the card. Not to always harp on the commentary, but having Askren on the call and in the corner for Moran in this match, not always my favorite thing. I don't think it was really anything particular, but when Flo has like 12 people commentating these matches, they could just not do that. But I guess that's neither here nor there. Overall, great performance from McKee, and I agree that he is going to be someone who is going to be, at the very least, a tough out at this weight going forward. So let's move up the card. We're going to move back to the metric system, my favorite thing with these cards, 61 kilograms. Ronna Heaton taking on Desiree Zavala. And I think this was an interesting match. It ended up being close, 10-8. I thought that both these people's styles kind of played into each other very well. Heaton scored a lot of points off Zavala's attacks, and then Zavala scored a lot of points on Heaton losing her on exposures. So it was kind of like two people who were destined to give up points to the other. Towards the end of the match, Zavala finally got to a front head and a cradle to try to, bring it close. But at that point, it was already 10-6, and then it became 10-8. I thought Heaton was the aggressor throughout the match. She was better on the feet, and even though she lost Zavala a few times in parterre and gave up points, I thought that she was the one dictating the pace and the rightful winner for sure.
I really enjoyed this. This was probably honestly my match of the evening in terms of entertainment value. Zavala spent the entire match really, or if he was shooting regularly. Heaton was able to score on some go behinds, able to break the lock, kind of spin behind. But like you mentioned, I think it was twice she got stepped over in a gut, and Zavala ended up on top. And Zavala, I think, had an exposure at some point in one of those sequences. So really high scoring. Both of them constantly kind of looking to score, looking to get in on legs. I think some people who were a little more familiar probably thought Heaton was a bigger favorite, and I think I would have thought so as too, but was a little sloppy in this one. I think that's one of those things where she's going to go back and maybe you never want people to be less aggressive in terms of entertainment value, but I think had she picked her spots a little bit more smartly, the match may not have been as close as it was. But credit to Zavala for taking credit or for taking advantage of those opportunities. Two girls that I think both are still pretty young. I want to say either have recently graduated or are about college age right now. So two girls you expect to be on the scene for a while.
Yeah, and I think we've seen Zavala engage in matches like this. She had that wild match with Jennifer Page on one of the Lion cards. And I think it's one of those things where if we see people who get into these high scoring matches with a lot of exchanges and a lot of points, sometimes those people figure it out and they're able to iron it out and not give up points and get to their own offense. And I think that that's a distinct possibility. I thought Heaton would be a bigger favorite in this match. I thought this is a match that maybe she could get the tech in. And I thought Zavala surprised her with her sort of squirminess and, stick-to-itiveness. So I think it was a good showing for both. And I agree it was probably the most exciting match.
And I think it might be a little counterintuitive here for some, but I also think those high-scoring matches with lots of flurries probably make the wrestler that we would consider the underdog a little bit less of an underdog in terms of there's more variance in scoring and outcomes kind of change a bit. Whereas if you leave it up to one or two shots in the match, you expect the wrestler that has a little bit more craft and a little more offense to be the one to be able to come out on top of those sequences. But when there's lots of scoring sequences and exposures and things are getting lost, it kind of throws the result kind of more into the balance. So I feel like for Zavala, her best attack or her best chance of winning was to constantly attack.
Absolutely. So we're going to move up to 215 pounds. Nate Jackson versus Wynn. Michalak, I think is how I say it. I think some people, Michalak is probably how you should say it. Yeah, I think that's right. This is one of those matches where I think a lot of people saw when this match was put together and they were like, well, Michalak has been out of action for so long that Jackson's probably going to take this one. And then there was sort of like a blowback, like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. This guy's an OG. And it's like, no disrespect to the guy, but he's been off the scene for a while. He's getting up there in age. I think he was a graduate assistant at Maryland when I was in high school. So, I mean, this is a guy who's been on the scene for a long time. And Nate Jackson is coming into his own. I thought, regardless of where Michalak is at, I thought Nate Jackson looked great. He's at his best when he's able to control distance and, almost like an MMA fight, be all the way out or all the way in. And I thought he did a good job of, double the singles in this match. He also scored from short offense. And you really saw like the whole range of attacks on the feet. And he also got a leg lace. And I think that Nate Jackson is a guy who, during this COVID era, we've seen his best and we've seen his worst. And I think when he's really, looking good, I mean, he's got that match with Mark Hall coming up. And I think that this matchup really, ups the excitement for that one for sure.
A couple of things. First of all, there were two matches on this card that involved current coaches who are well removed from the senior circuit, and neither of which were all that close or entertaining. So take that how you will. Secondly, I'm really, really curious about, first of all, how Mark Hall and Nate Jackson match up just in general, but also size-wise. You said this was at 215. Yeah. Mark Hall's coming up to 86 kilos from 174 in college. I never looked at Mark Hall of all that big of a guy, but everyone I talk to says he's really, really big and really dense. So maybe less than we think, but that is a large difference in weight. Yeah. That's 40 pounds from 215 to what Mark Hall was last year in college. So very, very curious about that. Thought Jackson looked good, looked like himself, was active, was aggressive, didn't mess around, and came in and got the job done.
Yeah, and I think, just to preview that hall match a little bit, I think, to slow Jackson down, you want to get your hands on him. You want to, make it a battle of position in the tie. And if you're giving up so much weight, I mean, that becomes infinitely harder. So I think it'll be interesting. I would favor Hall just because I think that he's, his ability to scramble and his defensive ability. I think if he made it like a low scoring match, he could probably win. But at the same time, I mean, it's almost an unknown. We haven't really seen Hall at 86, and then Jackson's big for 86, so it's going to be wild for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to move to 61 kilograms. Seth Gross taking on Zane Richards, and Seth Gross took this match 11-3. I thought that Richards came into this match with a really good game plan, and as the match went on and he got tired, he kind of got away from it, and it became a Seth Gross match. Right off the bat, Gross got to his 2-on-1 and went for that, inside Merkel leg thing, and Zane Richards just picked up his leg and turned it into his own offense. And I think that he consciously wanted to shoot from distance to avoid the scrambliness of Gross.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually got into a very good double, and he got in pretty deep, and Bader awarded him the points, but the refs didn't. And Gross was able to escape. And I think that really kind of Richards was like, if I'm sticking to my game plan, I'm still giving up points. And then it just became the Gross show where he was getting to his weird offense, and he's countering shots on the edge and still not giving up step outs, So I think it became a Gross match, and he kind of ran away with it there.
I think in addition to Gross being so funky and so unique at that weight class, he's heavy-handed, which wears you out. And then you have to work so hard to finish takedowns that it's not surprising to see guys get to the second period and not only be mentally exhausted trying to figure out what they're doing, but be physically exhausted because they have to work so hard for everything. So not only are you dealing with the hand fight and dealing with him constantly pulling down your head, you're dealing with all the energy you're exerting just to try to score 2 points there. And especially when as you mentioned, he's working to finish off that double and doesn't score. Then you've got, man, I'm exhausted, and man, what else do I have to do? And I think kind of got to the second period, and Gross is like, okay, like I didn't feel threatened anymore, and was able to kind of work some of his own stuff.
Right, and just to build on what you're saying, it's not just exhausting to get in there and try to score, but it becomes exhausting when you're attacking to not give up points.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you go in there and you're like, I'm going to attack, I'm going to shoot from the outside, I'm going to keep the offense on him. You do that a couple of times, and all of a sudden you're the one holding on and trying to prevent, getting belly wizard or giving up counters or, these odd exchanges. And yeah, I agree that it would just kind of wore on Richards. Gross is putting together quite a little COVID summer. I guess it's now winter, but he's winning a lot of impressive matches. Took some losses at the RTC Cup, but I think him at 57 at the Olympic trials is definitely going to be interesting because he's having himself
Here's the thing
run.
with Gross. I don't think he's got the ability to string enough matches together to actually win it, but I could see him beating somebody who we think could win it.
Right.
In trials. Like, it would not at all. I mean, I'm not going to pick a name out of the hat because I don't know whether it's going to be like a Thomas Gilman, a Dayton Fix, Spencer Lee, whoever. But it wouldn't shock me if somebody that we thought could be a contender to get to the finals and be the rep gets knocked out in the one match.
Right. Like his performance against Gilman, I do think there was some oddness in that match. And if they wrestled 100 times, I think Gilman probably wins like 90. But at the same time, if you're in a trials and a tournament, I mean, he introduces that element. He only has to happen once, right? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So you mentioned the other match of coaches besides Nate Jackson and Wynn Michalak. We have Ethan Lizak taking on Matt McDonough at 143 pounds. Matt McDonough had been out of action for, I think his last competitive match was back in 2015. And, Lizak's a guy who's competing regularly on the international circuit. He took some losses recently, but, he was in control here. He got to an early double from wrist control. And then he had sort of like this high gut crab ride thing. And I think McDonough was kind of willing to engage because he thought maybe he would be able to get some defensive exposures, and the refs weren't having it, and it was 10-0 pretty much over before it started.
What are we doing? Like, I get that there are people out there that are like, yeah, it's great. I want to watch Matt McDonough wrestling. I'm like, do you really? Did you really get to the end of this match and say, like, that was exciting? And it's not that, like, Matt McDonough isn't, like, still talented. Like, he still kick you or I's ass. But, like, so Lizak scores a 2, and they get to the edge, and he works his high gut. And, like, McDonough's parterre defense was to just, like, kind of reach back and try to stop Lizak on his own back. And, like, the first time it doesn't work, you're like, okay, like, that was unique, try something. And he just keeps trying it. And it doesn't work again and again. And it's like, I'm sure Matt McDonough is able to, like, belly out and stop himself from being turned, or at least try to stop himself from being turned. But instead, he, like, pressures back into Lizak and keeps repeatedly exposing his back until the match is over. Like, why? What are we doing here? Yeah. Why did anybody think this is a smart idea? It's like, I don't mean to knock Lizak. Good for you. Take the money and, like, take your win. But, like, give me somebody on the card who is currently interested in actually wrestling and trying to make something of this.
Yeah, I mean, nothing away from Matt McDonough. I really enjoyed watching him back in his college days, and I thought he was kind of underrated in his post-college freestyle career until he suffered a rash of injuries. But I don't think that this is the relaunch of his competitive. Like, I don't think he's getting back on the ladder. I think he wants to be a college coach. And, you know, we got trials coming up in a couple months. I'm sure that there's guys who weigh around 140 pounds who would love to wrestle Ethan Lizak on a flow card.
Put Ben Hornicle on your flow card.
Right. I mean, you know, and it's like Austin there's people in driving distance of that, you know. Oklahoma's not too far from there. I mean, I think there's plenty of guys who are, you know, competitive wrestlers who'd be willing to make that trip. And also, I mean, you know, I think McDonough is a big name and maybe brought in some eyeballs, but I just can't imagine that he's pulling in $9.99 subscriptions.
Nobody that wasn't going to watch was watching because Matt McDonough was wrestling on this card.
So, like I said, nothing away from Matt McDonough, but I think this match went how it went. Everyone expected, and probably could have found someone who is actively seeking qualification for the trials.
Because, anyway, you know, 65 kilograms in the U.S. isn't very deep.
Right. Yeah, not at all. All right. Speaking of 65 kilograms, we're going to go there now for Joey McKenna taking on Nahshon Garrett. Garrett coming up to 65. I think size kind of hurt him here. McKenna got an early 4, got to a single leg, and I think Garrett tried to do some sort of counter and ended up exposing stuff for the 4. He then was able to escape like a leg lace attempt to get behind for his only 2 of the match. In the second period, McKenna basically continued coming forward, got a pair of single leg takedowns, and then 2 gut wrenches after the second takedown to finish at 12-2. Yeah, I mean, I thought just watching the way Joey McKenna has wrestled, and he's kind of one of those guys where he's struggled when he's moved up in weight because his physicalness is so important to his style. He needs to get to the tie and get to that cross knee single. I thought that he was really going to be able to bully Garrett in this match, and I think that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't think Garrett looked particularly small, but the thing is when Garrett is down at 57 or 61, so much of his success is predicated not just on his speed, but his explosiveness. And when you're exploding into a guy, one that's further away because McKenna's pretty long, but also can deal with that strength and pretty much stop you in his tracks. Like, that takes away a lot of what Nahshon wanted to do. And his snaps weren't getting as much reaction out of a bigger guy. Was struggling in the hand fight. I actually thought like Garrett looked pretty good size-wise. Just a lot of the things that he's able to have success doing at 61, 57 didn't translate because he's not able to move around somebody like McKenna.
Yeah, and I think, you know, McKenna is interesting. This is the 65 weight class that we talked about that's very deep. A lot of guys there. McKenna was 3rd at senior nationals. But I think other than that tournament, his only other match this year was a loss he had against Tyler Berger on that show in a cage. So I think it was good for him to get some exposure and get a match here. it's just the prospects at 65 are so deep. I mean, at senior nationals, he beat guys like, Dardanes, Jaden Ironman, Chad Red, and he still, had to run into the buzzsaw Andrew Alirez and ended up finishing third. So I think he's a guy who has a future on the ladder. I just think that 65 is deep, and I don't see it clearing up for him at any point. But he's going to win more often than he loses on these events, especially when he has the advantages he had in this match.
McKenna's kind of in a weird spot, whereas I think he can, similarly to Gross, can beat a lot of the guys at 65. I don't know that he can beat them in order. I don't see him winning a match with Zane. I just think that that's a bad matchup for him. I think Zane does a lot of the things that McKenna wants to do, but better than McKenna. I think he'd have a hard time with the athleticism of an Oliver. Might be able to score a little crafty. I know that they've wrestled before. I don't know whether McKenna's come out on top in any of those. I can't remember off the top hand. I know he has the win over Yanni, but the nice thing about Yanni is they're similarly matched. One, they've wrestled a number of times in folk style, but they're similarly matched athletically and physically. And I think that brings then the craft and guile kind of each into play. And McKenna's almost equally kind of crafty in that way and technical. So I think he can beat a lot of guys. I just don't know that he can beat enough guys in a row in a tournament to come out on top and win that spot.
Absolutely. So we're going to move to 51 kilograms. Erin Golston taking on Emily Shilson. And I think, a lot of people are really high on Shilson. She's had some very good results at the age level. She won both U23 nationals and junior nationals this year and outscored her opponents 80-6 in both those tournaments. I favor Golston in this match, and I think that, we saw that early. She got a single leg on a sweep in the first period and then followed it up with 2 laces. So she ended the first period with I guess she got another takedown after that. So she ended the first period with an 8-1 lead. And I think, Shilson showed with that sweep single she hit to the far side in the second period that she clearly has the offense to compete. I just think that, this is one of those things with physical maturity and, veteranship. I think that Shilson can, start winning these matches. I just think at this point, Golston's a guy who's been, who's been international and, competed against some of the best in the world. I think that this is a good test for both. And I thought we saw, both the development of Shilson, but also the, the veteran and someone who holds down a spot like Golston.
I think Golston, first of all, has looked very good since moving to the Wisconsin RTC, a couple months ago, 2-3 months ago. Is wrestling very well, wrestling very confidently. Body type wise, I think this was a tough matchup for Shilson. Anybody that's going to be at 51 kilograms is not going to be very tall, but Golston's very short and very stout and strong. And I think that strength kind of showed here. She kind of moved Shilson around pretty easily. And then when she was working on top, was kind of able to kind of just horse her over a couple times. I think you mentioned kind of that experience is a big factor. Golston's been in these battles with world team members, with medalists. I think Shilson's got a little craft and then has length, and that swing single is really nice. We've seen it hit that on a lot of people. But right now, I just think it was kind of a bridge too far.
Yeah, and I mean, Golston had a very strong run on the circuit here. She won 10-0 over Demi Gomez on that HWC show where she was supposed to take on Sarah Hildebrandt, and that's the match that I would still want to see. She also beat Maria Vidalis 7-1 on the last Wisconsin RTC show. I think that that match with Hildebrandt would be great. Hopefully someone puts it on a show soon. I imagine that both these wrestlers are going to be on the Captain's Cup thing that's coming up, but hopefully I haven't really seen the rosters for that. But this is a match we probably will see again down the road. Yeah,
it's definitely one that I'm looking forward to. I imagine you probably see it at trials, but Golston right now, you got to be feeling pretty good. I don't think right now, if you asked 3 or 4 months ago or even now, I don't think a lot of people would be picking her to make the team. But from a confidence standpoint, she's got to feel she's been wrestling right now as well as she has in a good while and feeling really good going into trials.
100%. All right, so let's move to 152 pounds. James Green taking on Pat Lugo. And I think, for James Green, he's coming down in weight for the trials. He's never really had the greatest results as he's moved down. Well, he's had good results, but just not compared to his exploits at 70 kilograms. He did take this match 3-2 over Lugo. He scored an early takedown and kind of held on Lugo kicked him in the face at one point, which seemed to take a lot of air out of his balloon, which I don't really blame him for. But I think when James Green is cutting so much weight, and like I said, this is at 152 pounds, so this wasn't even all the way down. He seems to want to just slow the match down, control when he can control, get a takedown or two, and kind of hold on. And I think that is probably the best strategy if he's going to be physically depleted cutting weight. I just worry that against some of the guys at 65 who like to score a lot, it's just not enough.
Which is a lot of the guys at 65.
Right. And, we saw this at the RTC Cup when he tried to wrestle Yanni like this. It's like he looked good and he was in the match and he had his sprint and he got his points, and it just was not enough because, guys can score. So I think that Lugo was a test in the sense that Lugo is a guy, he's young, he's up and coming, he holds position well, he tries to wrestle, a similar tactical style to Green, but I'm not sure that Lugo is the kind of guy who will give Green trouble at 65 because it kind of plays into his game plan instead of making him wrestle a different way.
First off, I think Lugo is going to be one of those guys that's going to be on the scene for the next 5 to 8 years, and it's going to drive me nuts because he's just so good at what he does. But what he does is, no offense, Pat Lugo, not particularly entertaining to me in terms of holding position and pushing guys to the edge and not getting scored on and exploding when he can. It's just, it doesn't do it for me. I think your point with Green's great. I don't see how he hangs in the match with someone like a Zane or like a Jordan Oliver, who's going to be, he's going to put you on your back foot early and often. I didn't think he really looked all that bad in this. I think he looked fine, scores early points, wasn't threatened by Lugo, so he didn't really have any reason to put himself in danger. And then when he got kicked in the face, it was just kind of like, oh, well, that sucks. Now I'm just going to finish this match. Yeah. Especially with Lugo, who, I don't think Green ever felt in danger of being taken down in that match.
No, I'm not taken down, right?
And so as soon as he got up 2-0, I don't think his thought process was I don't need to do anything. But it was well, I'm not going to do anything that's going to put myself in danger. I'm just going to go win this match. On exhibition, I would like him to be a little more open because why not? And I think he probably would have scored more. But it was definitely cruise control after those first 2 points.
Yeah, and I think that, you mentioned Lugo's style. I think the transition from folk style to freestyle is going to be really good for him. We've already seen him beat Luke Pletcher to start off this, run of cards. And then he also beat Michalak, who he kind of traded matches back and forth with in folk style. And I think, not having to ride and not having to get out on bottom and being able to move guys around the mat and threaten step outs with his underhook, I think that really works out well for him. And I just think he's in a good training situation. He's going to have a team there at Hawkeye for a long time. So I definitely could see him as a guy being a tough out on open and trials cards for sure.
There are going to be a lot of 3-1 matches over the next 6 years.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to move up here. This is a very interesting match. Jaden Cox making his return at 97 kilograms against Hayden Zillmer. Cox has handled Zillmer more definitively, more dominantly over the years.
I thought he looked really good.
I thought he looked good. He's coming off COVID. I think he has really blended his style well, where he is wrestling when he wants to wrestle, where he wants to wrestle. Yep. His ability to say, okay, now I'm going to sprint and now I'm going to get a takedown. And it's there was that one sequence along the edge where he just went and went and went. And if you were Zillmer, it's there's nothing you could do.
It was the last sequence, and you could hear, I believe it was Kevin Jackson in the corner yelling, sprint, sprint, sprint. Yep. And just 3 different times he probably could have been on a leg, but just had Zillmer reaching in air. And no offense to Hayden Zillmer, he's not the most nimble or athletic guy, even though he's been great the last 4 years. But just, he doesn't get scored on. His reactions are super, super quick. He had some sprawls where it was Zillmer was just snatching at air. We've talked a lot about Snyder Cox, and I think I mentioned that I think it's really, really close and really, really even. But man, I don't know how I think that Snyder's going to score or get to legs. we'll talk about it when we talk about our final match of the night. But like, I struggle to see where he's going to really have to be able to work with snaps and fakes and things like that. Because if it's just a matter of timing, he's never going to touch Jaden's legs. I thought Jaden looked really, really good here, especially somebody who had a bout with COVID in the last 6 months that put him in a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to think strategically what Kyle Snyder's game plan is, because it's just, if you were going to try to get to a tie and get to a setup and work to a single, I mean, that's already so much work. And there's so many things that could go wrong there, where you could lose it, or you could, lose position and get reattacked. But then even if you do get to like a leg and get to standing, we've seen Jaden just like not give up points from those positions anyway.
And like, if we look back at like Jaden against Taylor, where it was 2-1, and Taylor, I think, took the first match. Like, Taylor, first of all, I think is a much better athlete than Kyle Snyder in terms of, not much better athlete might not be the best term. I don't know how. A little quicker, a little more explosive, a little more agile. But also when he gets in on legs, he's much longer. So there's there are different avenues to finish takedowns. Like, Kyle Snyder is a really kind of short, stout guy. So look, maybe I have egg on my face and I made it look silly. I don't think it's going to be like a blowout by any means. I think I could definitely see Snyder taking a match or taking 2 matches and making the team. I think it's really, really damn close. But you've got to be watching this thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do and where am I going to get my points?
Yeah, and I think that the 3-match series just makes it so hard. I mean, to have to do it and do it twice. Yeah, that sprint was so impressive. And it's just like, I feel like because Jaden is so good defensively, it almost is like it's hard to imagine a match not coming down to whether he can get a takedown in the sprint and then seeing the sprint, right? So it's like the two things blend together so well that it's
the weird thing with Jaden is he has some close in terms of score matches with guys he shouldn't, and in the past has lost matches he shouldn't, although it's been a while since that's been the case. But more so than maybe anybody else, you feel like he just wrestles almost like a Russian style in terms of the way he conserves energy and only uses it in sequences where he decides he wants to score or needs to really, really fend something off. Because this was what, 6-2? 6-2 was the final of this match?
6-2 was the final.
And it wasn't close. I mean, it was never even remotely close. And I think that last takedown just showed it when for the last 30 seconds up 4-2, Kevin Jackson's calling out sprint, and within probably 10, 15 seconds, Jaden scored. And you felt like he probably could have done that 2 or 3 more times if he wanted to.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move to the main event. Like I said in the intro to the show, Adeline Gray versus Tamyra Mensah-Stock became the main event after Jordan Burroughs and David Taylor was delayed. The match was 2 reigning world champions, Adeline Gray, a world gold medalist at 76 kilograms, taking on Tamyra Mensah-Stock, 68 kilogram world champion. And I think I was very high on Adeline coming into this match. I thought that she was going to be able to really move Mensah-Stock around the mat and get to her offense. And I thought maybe she could make a difference with her ability to turn and parterre. That was not the case. Mensah-Stock scored she scored a first period takedown, and she was able to hang with it and elevate the legs and really get an exposure from that same sequence. That was the only scoring of the match, 4-0. But I think, when the break happened and I'm watching the match, I'm like, all right, so this is going to be 3 minutes of Adeline coming and trying to get this match even. And I think, even though there was no scoring in that second period, the fact that Tamyra Mensah-Stock was able to go a full 3-minute period and give up no points, I was overly impressed. And, I watched this match twice this morning just because I just still don't understand how it happened.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'm sure people yell at me because, who the hell am I to criticize a 38,000-time world champion?
Yeah.
I thought Adeline looked horrible. This is probably, I know that in the wrestling community, in terms of media, you're not supposed to be critical of people, but she just looks so slow. Just so slow. And some of that is Tamyra making her look slow. I mean, Tamyra Mensah-Stock might be one of the best pound-for-pound wrestlers in the world, or was clearly one of the best pound-for-pound women's wrestlers in the career as a world champion. But what was that sprawl? Like, what was that? I have no clue what the sprawl was. She got her one leg back, didn't react with her left leg, and then almost like immediately just kind of sat to her own butt. Like, really didn't. And then when she did give up to, was, I guess, looking to hit a switch of some sort, because didn't belly out and then gave up a really unnecessary other two that, like, she almost kind of handed to Tamyra. So, like, again, all credit to Tamyra for looking fantastic, dealing with the strength fairly easily and not being moved around the mat. But, like, Adeline looked really, really plodding in this match. And I don't know whether it's a matter of that's just where 76 kilos is on the women's scene. Like, there just aren't a lot of 76 kilogram women that are around there they're wrestling at that level. But, like, man, you wrestle like that in Tokyo, I don't care what weight class you're wrestling at. You're gonna have a hard time, because I thought you looked just in quicksand the entire way. And it's not like, to me, it wasn't a case of, like, you see some people wrestle against a Jordan Oliver or occasionally like a Yanni or Darian Cruz where they make people look slow because of how quick they are. I thought Tamyra looked good, but it wasn't just like, oh, or against Jaden, for instance, where there were some instances where Zillmer just looked slow, and I think it was more just Jaden being ridiculous and being in 4 different spots in a matter of 2 seconds. I did not get that sense here. I just thought Adeline feet felt like they were in cement the entire time. And, like, you on the shots, there wasn't really much of a setup to her shots. And so Tamyra was able to get her leg back fairly easily on the singles because they were coming from so far out and there wasn't much of a setup and they were just super, super slow.
Yeah, I think that it could be a little bit of everything. I mean, I think that Adeline has been out of action since the Pan American Games or Pan American Championships back in March. She did default out of the championship match there with an injury. I'm not sure if she was actually injured or if that was just sort of like, you got a medal, bring it home. I'm not really sure. But I do agree that she did seem to be slow. And she did hang out in that indefensible position there for a long time and gave up that other exposure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to play like, armchair. I don't know what it was like in there, but it did seem
I'm definitely
like she was a little
the
bit
bad
behind.
guy here. I'm
right. Yeah, no. Everybody, you can hate on Clay all you want. But I do think, it is possible that 76 is just, that level. I mean, we've seen this in MMA that there just aren't a lot of great fighters above 145 pounds. I mean, it's possible that the level of competition is that different. I just can't really see that. I wouldn't say that it's, I mean, I think there's plenty of good women wrestlers at 76, and I think Adeline's one of the best, if not the best. But
yeah, you think of like
yeah.
Weeby and Weeb and Adar, and you think that they're like, oh, okay, like, I mean, these are really talented wrestlers. I generally do think that. Like, she also blasts through some, like, her doubles look super, super quick against some of the 76s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like she could have been shooting from one side of my apartment to another against Tamyra. Like, yeah. I don't know, man. It's just, I was really, really startled at how far away she was from even like getting to a lock. It wasn't even close.
Well, I mean, there's some time. They got competition coming up, so hopefully she can turn it around. But I do agree that, like I said, I thought Adeline would handle her pretty handily, and that's just not what happened at all. So she will have a chance to answer those questions, and hopefully, for her sake, they go well at the Olympic trials. Because, yeah, I mean, I think that this was kind of like one of those back to the drawing board performances for sure. Yeah,
I was kind of surprised at how this turned out. But again, like you mentioned, Tamyra's still supposed to be down at 68 is the plan. I mean, it would be kind of funny. Now she was like, well, I can win at 76. So
why cut the weight? Right?
Why not just go 76? But Tamyra's supposed to be down at 68. And I think for the team's sake, having her at 68 and Adeline 76 is pretty awesome. I talked about it, I think, last week. For as good as the men's team is shaping up to be, the women's team, you're looking at potentially gold medalist in Jakara Winchester, gold medalist in Adeline Gray, gold medalist in Tamyra Mensah-Stock, and then you've got Sarah Hildebrandt in there. You've got Helen Maroulis in there. I mean, look, I'm not sitting here saying, and I'm not even remotely predicting that the U.S. is going to win like 4 or 5 Olympic gold medals in women's wrestling, but like, it's not that far-fetched.
Yeah, it's a very strong and deep team for sure. And I'm excited to see it.
So before we do this, you mentioned it Wednesday. We got what? David Taylor and Jordan Burroughs.
Yes, and apparently they're just putting a card together as well. So maybe there'll be some other matches at the last minute. Maybe some more college coaches that are out there. Yeah. How do you feel about that match? Because I'm having a real hard time conceptualizing it just because David Taylor at 86 has been so different than David Taylor at 74. Maybe not style-wise, but like physically, he's looked like a different guy. And we saw Jordan Burroughs kind of struggle early with Zahid Valencia's size before Zahid like really ran out of gas. But at the same time, like I can't pick Taylor. So it's like one of those things where like a lot of factors seem to be going in Taylor's direction. But I also think that Burroughs is going to win.
I've already got people yelling at me from the Adeline thing and from the pick.
Just keep going, man. Dig your hole, baby.
And I'm already getting called a homer, so let me go Taylor 6'4".
There, 6'4". Okay, all right, fair enough. I think that's fair. I mean, I think no matter what happens, Taylor's going to get a lead, right? I think he's going to get a couple maybe two early takedowns, and then Jordan's going to try to come back. Pretty much what he did against Valencia. It's just, with the exception of the Gabe Dean match, Taylor has just looked so good recently. It'll be interesting for sure.
That's a not insignificant size difference.
Yeah,
I think is. I mean, it's not even like I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I think they're pretty evenly matched. Even though we saw Burroughs beat him 4 or 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago at this point, maybe longer than that. We saw Burroughs win those matches. One, I think Taylor's jumped levels. But even so, if you went, oh well, they're fairly evenly matched, 1 or 2 points either way. Even if you went to Burroughs, I think that's a very significant difference in size and strength.
All right, well, that's coming up next week. Also, the return this weekend, college. Anybody you want to shout out that you saw in college action? I got a couple guys who I think I'm gonna, give the proverbial Headgear sticker to.
For me, it's Andrew Shiniglia, PA native, homeboy, 2-time PA state champ, now at Navy, with a second period tech fall over Tyler Badger Pitt, who I think is pretty darn good. I think Shiniglia right there. Was number 1 kid in his weight as a senior, and I think genuinely could be a future national champ under Colette.
Great coaching situation there at Navy too. Colette's one of the best guys at developing guys, right? Like a lot of coaches can recruit and they can get you into shape and put you in position to win. But over the years, when he was at the high school level, when he was an assistant, when he was a head coach, guys who wrestle under Colette develop technically and get better. And I've always been impressed with that. My couple guys, Dylan Ragusin from Michigan, pinned Nicholas Aguilar in like a minute. He like whipped him over, literally made his feet leave the ground with a cow catcher. That was absolutely amazing. I think 125 is going to be his spot to lose for Michigan. There was some question about that, but I'm excited to see him against some of the bigger names at 125. Liam Cronin, who transferred to Nebraska from Indiana, absolutely dominated Patrick McKee, which was fabulous. I mean, Cronin was a guy, he's always been a physical fire plug guy, but I've never really seen him kind of dominate a ranked guy like that, and that was a fabulous performance. So those are my 2 standout performances, guys, I wanted to shout out, but I'm sure as we go through this college season, we're going to be breaking down a lot more college matches as well.
Good to have some wrestling back. We'll have more college coming up. We'll have the Flow card on Wednesday. We've got Henry Deglaine in France, a big U.S. contingent going out there next week. So lots to look forward to. It's a good time to be a college wrestling fan.
Absolutely. All right. You can check me out on Twitter at Richard A. Mann. Always there. Clay, you want to shout yourself out there?
You can always go to at By C Sauerteig on Twitter and at Flow Legal on Twitter. You check out the Penn State Media Day coverage coming up on January 12th over at Black Shoe Diaries as well. And I'll have some more Penn State coverage coming up.
All right, y'all. That's going to do it for us as I die from that Flow Legal thing. I'll talk to you guys later.
Take it easy.